Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. I know that you're probably driving to Washington, D.C. Maybe you're getting ready to go to your state capitol tomorrow on the 6th, or maybe not do any of that stuff. But I want you to realize that it's never too late to go get Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's a best-selling book. You can get it in paperback. You can get it in electronic form. And reality is you can get an audiobook right now while you're driving, and it would be great to have. And you will learn before you get to Washington, D.C., how the attackers look at you so that you can turn it around and build better defenses, awareness, and plans of action, which, I mean, quite frankly, if you're going to Washington, D.C., you better start doing that right now because you don't know what's going to happen. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. I wrote it for you. Go get it, and let's start the show.
The truth has arrived.
My name is Jonathan Gilliam, and this is The Experts. And it's great to be with you. I know that so many people that are listening to this right now probably are traveling to go to Washington, D.C. for the 6th, January 6th. And you're going to be hearing this on the 5th, but many of you are going to be traveling. So I figured, I haven't been on in a couple days, and I'm kind of cutting back on the number of podcasts that I'm doing. Instead of trying to do one every day, I try to do one at least 3 times a week, but really I'm just trying to do one when the inspiration comes over me to talk about stuff, because I'm just talking about the same nonsense every day. I mean, how many times, this isn't a news reporting podcast, okay? It comes up under news commentary, but the reality is this is an information podcast, and it tells you, what to look for. I talk a lot about you and your motivations and the reality of things that are happening in this world from a different perspective. I look, first and foremost, if I don't understand what's going on, I go find an expert that does. That's why I call the show The Experts. And sometimes I have them on here if they can come on here, but quite often, a lot of the times I don't have to have them on here. I can sit down and talk with them, and then I can, because that's what the news does. Listen, except the news doesn't give you an expert opinion. They take what quote unquote experts say or what's being said, and then they spin it to whatever their narrative is. What I try to do is, or not what I try, it's what I do. I go and I find the experts if I don't know about it, and then I convey that message to you. Once they make me understand it, then I can help you to understand it. But quite often, a lot of the stuff that's going on in politics and leadership, I can speak on myself. I mean, I've been a part of 4 different agencies, and I've done a tremendous amount of things in my life that have really blessed me with an overall view of the reality of what's going on, not just in politics, but in this world. And, I've talked a lot about this to great extent. And one of the things that I find when I reflect and I go back and I look at what's happening and I look at the people who've made the biggest impact in my life, and who's actually the people that have taught me how to look at things this way, they're great people in their own careers. Some people don't even have degrees, but they have this overwhelming thing, this baseline of understanding of who they are and the reality of what's going on in this world. They're realists, and sometimes they're experts in a particular field. But quite often what I find is that these are people who are level-headed, who stop and ask the question, what is really happening here? And that has absolutely helped me formulate the way I look at things, not just the way I've been trained as an investigator by several different agencies, but also these mentors that I've had. And again, these are people, some of them don't know each other. Some of them have passed away. Some of them are still here. Some of them were my instructors in the military, or mentors in the military. But all of them had this characteristic that they woke up and they were seekers of understanding. They all look for knowledge. They look for experience in their own lives. They want to experience things, and then they gain their understanding through those things, and ultimately they become very wise. So it's not just knowledge. It's not just about book smarts. It's not just about book smarts and understanding, like I just said a second ago, when somebody tells me something and I understand it. Yes, I can repeat that to you. But what I found along the way is that, you can have knowledge where you actually study or, you go through a training. You can have the understanding by being told this is what the reality is of what you're going to do or what the world is like. And then there's the actual experience. You talk to police officers, for instance, they'll tell you, they went to the police academy. And when they left the police academy, that's when they started to become cops. It wasn't in the academy. They checked the boxes, became qualified to become cops. But when you graduate from the academy, the reality is, the law says you're a police officer, but you're going to go through, if it's a good police department, you're going to go through a field training where you're being guided by a senior officer. And through that, you develop a true experience level to where you're taking your knowledge and your understanding and you're actually experiencing it. And that, to me, I believe, is the wisdom soup. Those are the things that really do help you find wisdom. And combine those with, the reality that you show up. You show up not for yourself, but you show up for reality. You show up to see what's happening. You show up and you ask the question, what is real? What is truth? Ultimately, that is what wisdom is all about. And I know it's all these people, traveling to Washington, D.C. Many people have not traveled to Washington, D.C. And quite frankly, I'm going to be honest with you. I've said this many times on this podcast and on social media, and I've asked the question to people, why are you going to Washington, D.C.? I would say most people that I've talked to are going there to support the president. That's ultimately what they're going to do. And while I think that's all well and good, to me, that's a tremendous letdown in hearing from the Patriots that the reason that they're going to Washington, D.C. is to support the president. And I'll tell you why that's a letdown for me. Not that they're going to support the president. I love that. I love the fact that they're going there to support a man who literally, the president, he's in his 70s. And, unless he lives to be ripe old age of 100 or more, he's not going to be on this earth for 20 more years. Maybe if you live to be 100, God bless him if he does. But most people die and they're around their 80s. That's the life expectancy in this country. And so, he has really spent the latter years of his life succeeding in ways that most people will never fathom. They'll never experience the level of true service that this president has felt, because most people who, when they reach a level of the president, they're given great respect, they're given criticism, but ultimately, you'll always hear people say, I respect the office. I may not respect the man, but I'm going to respect the office. And so there is a level of respect that goes with it. This president has gotten, at least from half the country, no respect, zero respect. And regardless if he's a dramatic New Yorker, the fact is he's done some pretty amazing things in his presidency and got no credit for it from half of the country and many people around the world. So he's, I think going there to support him is fantastic. But here's why I say it's a letdown. When people say they're going to support the president, and this is what I really hate. The commander-in-chief asked us to, he told us to be there. Well, first of all, if you're not active duty in the military, he's not, or even a reservist, but he's not your commander-in-chief. If you've never been in the military, he's not your commander-in-chief. He's the commander-in-chief of the military. People get this stuff wrong all the time. I don't really fault civilians. I mean, I guess they're just supposed to learn this stuff. They don't teach it in school. And so people hear these things and they believe that when the president gives you, the citizen, an order, that he's your commander in chief and you should do it. Well, that's not the case. The president's not a dictator. He's not he's not a slave owner. He is the president. He's the CEO of the country, and he is the commander in chief of our military. But if the president says, I'd like you to be there January 6th, and you say, you know what, I'm going to do that because I'm going to support him, that's great. But I keep saying this, and here's the reality. This is what really is a letdown for me when I ask all these people why you're going to Washington, D.C. No one on social media. I did this whole thing the other night. I stayed up all night. It was actually Friday on Twitter. I think it was Friday or Saturday, and I was on Twitter. And that's really when you're going to get the most honest answers from people. You know, I love late night people. I'm a late night person. Right now it's 4:00 in the morning on Tuesday, and I'm a late night guy. You know, I stay up all night. I sleep a few hours during the day, and that's just the way my body clock works. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But I feel like night people are tremendously honest, brutally honest at times. And so I kept this thing going all night. I asked, just two questions. Why are you going there? And what do you expect to come out of that? And virtually no one said because we want to be united. And that's a real letdown for me. Because the reality is that's why we're in this position. Because the conservatives in this country, the constitutionalists, that's what I like to call us, we are not united. We may be united in thought, but we don't unite. Even when the first time they had this massive protest was 2 months ago. I didn't go to it. I was highly critical of it for this reason. I went to the last one that was 3 weeks ago, and I was absolutely right. Virtually no speech on unification. Virtually none. It was all about the president, or the worst part of it was the majority of speakers that got up on these stages only talked about themselves, or we got to support the president. We got to support the president. Listen, you want to support the president, we should be unifying. We should be lock, stock, and barrel. States should be meeting. If you really want to do this right, the states and people in the states should have gotten together and went there and said, we are going to have Arkansas here. We're going to have New York over there. We're going to have Montana over here. They don't do that. There's no unification because these people you're all going to go back home and splinter and you're not going to be unified. And you think that something is going to come out of this that is going to be profound and great. You listen, you really have to guard yourself against narcissism in this day and age because of the way social media is, because of the way all these things are. It really does set people up for a narcissistic fall. And the reason I bring up narcissism, I've done this show, before, many times talking about narcissism and this hero complex that you're going to go and you're going to individually, your participation means more than the other people, or that you're going to go there and your support matters. Listen, you're a citizen, your action and your involvement does matter, but ultimately a coming together with other like-minded people and being a strong, unified, free citizenry is ultimately the one thing that you can do that would change all of this and ensure that it never happens again. But to my knowledge, that is not going to happen on the 6th. People are going to show up. They're going to support the president. They're going to rally. They're going to stand around and listen to speakers. And quite frankly, yes, I get hired to speak, and I probably volunteer more than I get hired to speak. And I go speak at these things. But myself, and there's a few others, we show up and we do our best to try to unify people. And that is just not the case with the majority of speakers that are out there. So I don't know what we can do. I'm still debating on whether or not I'm going to go down there tomorrow and be there on the 6th. If I do, I may very well bring a bullhorn and try to muster people. I don't know if that'll even do anything. If people are fired up when they're there. I've been preaching that people should stay home and do this in their capitals and show their support that way. But quite frankly, I don't think we're going to get the results, long-term results. I don't really know what the president, because there's been no guidance. One of my biggest criticisms for this president, and I have few criticisms, but I would say one of the biggest criticisms I have is the fact that he does not give guidance to the people. Saying that we're going to win this election is not guidance to the people. Making sure that win or lose, if before he leaves, that the people understand that they are the powerful. They are the protectors of freedom. They're the ones who serve in the military, the people that the president commands. This military, there's no speak of that from anybody in politics. And quite frankly, where we are now, the people that understand that have really become the minority in this country, because everybody else thinks that it's just show up and rally. Most people just think you should just show up and rally. Just be there and things will change. But I hate to break it to you, and I'm trying not to make this show a Debbie Downer show, but the reality is the people that are in power, most of them don't care at all about your rally. They don't care at all that you showed up. You're not going to pressure them into doing anything. So I think this is where the conservatives in this country and the president have failed, is that people are mustering in Washington, D.C. without guidance. And that does nothing. I don't know, maybe this podcast will inspire some people and they will start to see how important it is for people to come together and unify right now. I would hope, because, the title basically of this episode of this podcast is, why do you actually, I'm asking the question, why are you called to be a patriot? Do you understand why you're called to be a patriot? I was raised in Arkansas in a little town called Deauville up in the Ozarks. I always say it was where, from the Beverly Hillbillies, he was shooting at some coon, and up from the ground come a bubbling crude. And they said, Jed, move away from there. Why he would move away from there now, I don't know. But anyway, he moved to California. That's where they told him he had to be in the show. But that is where I'm from. And that's where Dog Patch USA, the Little Abner story, was from. It is so wholesome, or was wholesome. It's still somewhat wholesome. But it's such an amazing place, along with Arizona, two of the, and I would say Florida in there as well, but three of the freest places I've ever been, where I just feel normal. I feel free. Want to carry a gun? Carry a gun. I would say Arizona is the most free, but unfortunately Arizona is, they're kind of suffering from the tidal wave of leftists that are leaving California and some of these other states, and they're, because of exactly what I'm talking about, this lack of unification with the conservatives, the constitutionalists, they are really falling fast over the leftist cliff. So today, again, why are you a patriot? Why are you called to be a patriot? I want to share these things with you, because I want you, as you prepare to go to Washington, D.C., or as you sit at home, or as you drive to work, I want you to contemplate these things. Why are you a patriot? Why were you called to be conservative-minded? Why is it that the things that the right believe in, for instance, saying amen and now a woman, which is absolute nonsense and actually borderline pagan, well, I wouldn't even say borderline. It's really pagan. You can look all that up. It comes from back in the really it goes all the way back to the worship of the moon and the sun, and Lilith Fair and all these different things. I mean, that's where this whole thing comes from, that people confuse with equality. There's a lot of people out there that believe in just like Judaism and Kabbalism. People think that the Cabal is really Judaism. It's not Judaism. It is a cult. It's a pagan religion. I want you to ask yourself why you were called to be a patriot and why these things that the left does don't make any sense to you. Because ultimately, this is what I believe it is. I believe, some people are raised in the city, some people are raised in the country. There's men, there's women, old and young, that are called to be patriots. And I think it comes from this foundation of what I was talking about earlier, which is a knowledge, a studying of how this country was founded. And that's really dying a quick death as well, because the Department of Education, which is the most leftist, I mean, it's basically a communist agency, is quickly programming that out of education, which is a history of this nation and the founding fathers and how and why we became who we are. But I think there's often this foundation of understanding in that, even at a minimal level, an understanding of the first three. Most people just have an understanding of the first two amendments, but at least the first three. Most people don't even recognize the Third Amendment when you're telling them about quartering and no quartering in your home, and they don't really get that. But the first two amendments alone can change the way a person sees everything. And an understanding of the Declaration of Independence, declaring your independence from a tyrant. That alone can change people or mold them with a great foundation and understanding of why we have this Constitution, why we have this aggressive stance against anybody who comes in and tries to change the form of government. They will understand that we were under the control of a king and your freedoms were oppressed. So I think that the knowledge, the base knowledge that many people get in some schools and a lot of people get from their parents and their family, and also their Judeo-Christian values will show you this as well. The understanding that you get is as you learn. People meet veterans, or they serve in the military, or they see law enforcement doing things and fighting terrorism and dying in the line of duty and fighting gang members. You have people who they develop an understanding because they maybe live in rural areas and they see the city and these high crime rates, and they understand the reality of a structured government. You couple that. This understanding of, your free speech. I mean, people who live in the country versus in the city, they're going to understand that. I may call a police officer. They may not be there for 30, 40 minutes, or in the case of Van Buren County, Arkansas, they may not come because that's the most worthless sheriff's department I've ever seen in my life. The whole legal system in and around Van Buren County, Arkansas, is absolutely disgusting. The judges are horrible. The prosecutors are horrible. And the sheriff's department is probably the worst law enforcement agency I have ever come in contact with in my over 20 years of service to this country, in and out of official service and in law enforcement. Van Buren County, Arkansas is the worst. So rural people may, a lot of times they grow up with this understanding that they have to protect themselves and they need to be able to protect themselves. And that also develops an understanding of the Constitution and of your First and Second Amendment rights. I find it very interesting that people that live in cities where, they are constantly talking about because it's a very cosmopolitan area. Whatever city you go to, free expression. People are they're vying for a position. You get the most type A personalities in big cities, and being able to say what you feel helps you stand out in a city. But I find it very interesting that they're the ones who want to stifle the First Amendment before anyone else. And so they fall off that wagon of understanding and having a foundation of this nation. And they think people in the city largely believe that the Constitution, or that the rights in the Constitution, only serve them. They don't serve the people that they don't like. They think it's for them, and it should only be for them. And again, cities are different than rural areas. Rural areas, people rely on themselves. They don't rely on the government as much. Although there is a lot of welfare, there's a lot of poverty now in the rural areas. A lot of that was brought on way before COVID from drug use and from an economy that was basically crapped all over by both the Republican and the Democrat parties. And this insistence, for some strange reason, to send your factories overseas because you got to have more money, you got to be richer. I've never understood that. You're going to debilitate your own country and put your people out of work just so you can get richer. And I'm as far from a socialist as you could get, or a communist, but I do believe that if you are going to if you're going to take a factory and your great idea, and you're going to go out of this country to manufacture that just so you can get richer, well, there should be a high penalty for taking jobs out of this country into another country and benefiting those leftist nations, most of these places, where they treat people terribly. No, there's no equal rights. There's all oppression in many of these other countries where you go and get cheap labor. I mean, you're going to get cheap labor because there's no protection of the people. But interestingly enough, those companies that do that are often ran by people who are on the far left. And it comes from the hypocrisy of the left. The further you get away from the Constitution, the further you get away from the history of this nation, the further you get away from morals and values, the further you get away from understanding that you have to protect yourself, and that a person that is self-reliable is important for freedom. The further you get away from that, the more left you're going to be, and the less importance you're going to put on the Constitution. So I think, see, here's the knowledge and the understanding, and then the experience of growing up with an understanding of the Constitution. It helps you realize, when people want to say something, want to criticize something, they understand that they have the right to do that. You want to protect yourself, and you live in an area where you can carry a gun, and you go get a gun, and you carry that gun, and day in and day out, you don't pull it out and just randomly shoot people or kill people. You carry your gun responsibly. It builds an understanding of the knowledge that you have of why you have that gun, and you experience this. And that in of itself, see, those three things combined build a wise human being. And there's absolutely no way that a person who has true knowledge, even a little bit of true knowledge of the Constitution and the Founding Fathers and U.S. history, a person that combines that with understanding by actually living those things, like carrying a weapon, understanding that, and that your opinion and your right to have that opinion matters, understanding that other people's opinions matter, that they should be able to have those things. Once you start to understand those things, and there's not one American citizen that has that knowledge, that understanding, and actually goes out and experiences life that is going to be a leftist. They're just not. Now, along with this, I did a show on this, I think it was 108, episode 108, where I talked about demonic influence. I truly believe that the left is demonically influenced. And I think there's more demonic influence in cities than there is in rural areas. A lot of that has to do with the level of importance, government importance, and the size of business, and just the sheer number of people that are in cities versus in rural areas. I truly believe this. I think that there's some proof for this. Also, Christianity and religion in general is much stronger in the rural areas. People say, well, there's more people, so there's got to be more Christians in cities. Well, that's not necessarily true. So I think that plays a big role in this. And I know there's people who are patriots who are listening to this saying, well, I grew up in a city. I'm not saying, I don't ever give anything a blanket statement. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that fortunate for you, you were born in such a way, or God gave you a certain amount of insight where you could see these things. And at some point in your life, I don't know if we could trace it back to when it happened, but there's some point in your life where you were given a choice to think this way or that, and you chose the right way. And trust me, folks, one decision to think and understand reality can affect the rest of your life. There's no doubt. I've seen it. And I think these are some of the reasons why you find that you have been called to be a patriot. I think along with this understanding and this knowledge and this real life experience, along with not being as affected by the demonic influence, I have to say that people that are patriots are awake. You know how the left always talks about being woke? I find that the more people talk about being woke, the reality is the more asleep that they are, the more gullible they are, the more prone to a special interest or some type of something that's made them very angry, an injury, quite often to their psyche. I find that more often than not. People say, I'm woke now. I see reality. And I say, what is your reality? And the reality is going to be a narrative, not an understanding based on knowledge and experience. Quite often I've heard multiple people that are white talk about racism and talk about white privilege. And these people have never experienced anything at all to that nature. I used to have a guy that lived right down the hallway. This is one of the great things about New York. I had a guy that lived right down the hallway from me. He was black. And we used to have the greatest talks because he was somewhat conservative and he was in investment banking. And he said that his entire life, he always strove to be an individual and to be educated. And because of that, he got out of, and he grew up in the hood. He got out of the hood as soon as he could because the hood had nothing for him. And he understood that he was the answer, not a government handout, not approval by somebody, not some equal rights. He was the reason or the answer for getting out of the hood. He knew, and this is his words, okay, not mine. He knew that, and this has happened to me a couple times in conversation, he knew that not, for instance, going into a location where there's been multiple gang shootings, and I'm talking about like a convenience store, walking there with a hoodie pulled down with this pissed off look on his face, he knew not to do that because that wasn't him. He was never going to allow somebody else to dictate his fashion, what he was angry or what he expected other people to be like. And he said because of that, he wasn't angry. He had a great wife and a daughter, and they had a dog, and he had a great income, and he had multiple degrees, and the guy's just an amazing guy. Because he didn't buy into this anger, special interest, or this woke mentality. I talked to another guy in Florida, and I don't know if he listens to this podcast or not. I told him to look me up on Facebook. He did. This was almost 2 years ago. And because he actually followed me on a day when I hosted the Hannity radio show, and his email got lost in the midst of all these emails. But he works at a Pilot gas station down in Florida, and he was originally from New York. And he had, I don't know, 3 or 4 kids, and he was talking about how they all are college graduates, and they all have these different jobs, and none of them see themselves as black because he didn't raise them to see themselves as black. He raised them to see themselves as Americans and successful Americans. And they are. And he said it's crazy because when they get together, they don't discuss things the way that he would or has seen it in other black families. They have conversations about life and success, and a lot of times, quite frankly, they talk about the people that they know that say that they're woke and that have this mentality of this victim mentality. And what's interesting about both of these gentlemen, and again, I've met women like this as well that are black, and this is just the most amazing thing. I want you to think about this, okay? The way they look at the world is exactly the way I'm talking about anybody else, white or Asian or whatever, that's conservative, that's a patriot. They look at the world in a realistic way. They show up to participate, and they do not allow the world to dictate who they have to be or what category they have to fall into. See, there's this thing. There's this, and it's not a rare thing. It's not limited only to these people. There's this, I think it's a choice that comes along in your life. Maybe it's not one choice. Maybe it's multiple choices that you make. But I see this in all these people that I talk to that say that they're patriots, that say that they're conservative, that understand the Constitution, that love being free. And that's their main focus, is staying free. I see this commonality amongst them all, and that's that they wake up, they seek truth, and they see reality. They don't try to make the reality into something that supports their victim mentality. They don't seek for reasons to hate the nation that they live in and were born in. They seek truth and understanding and success and freedom. That's this common thing. And here's the downfall to that, is that because all of these people that I've met that are patriots, because they look at things in a realistic manner, because they seek freedom and they enjoy their life, by and large, a lot of times they just want to be left alone, or they want to partake and have a good time, and they don't want to risk their freedom. They don't want to risk what they have. And that is totally understandable. But the mistake that everybody is making is that in order to be a safe patriot, you have to be let me say it this way. In order to be, to remain a patriot and to have your freedom, that you have to play it safe. And they mistake organizing, they mistake strength and the projection of strength through unity. They mistake that as either an encroachment on their freedom, or they mistake it as, well, I don't want to get in trouble, so I'm not going to go do anything. Because let me tell you, most of these places, for instance, where Antifa shows up and there's a protest, most of these Antifa groups are not that large. In D.C., they, just like people are coming from all over the country to support the president, there's Antifa that's going to come from all over the nation as well. But by and large, majority of the time, their numbers don't even come close to measuring up when there's a really big patriotic rally. And even if they did, if the Patriots stood together, listen, people who stand up for freedom are always going to be more ferocious than those that are trying to take it away. Because it's just like when you see a zebra, for instance. I don't like these videos where I see animals fighting, but you look on Instagram, they show the lions going in for the kill, or in this case, it was alligators, and they had a zebra, and they were just tearing this thing, but he was still fighting all the way down and into the water. I was like going, man, just freaking put your head into water and drown. But he was nipping at him and going for it because he didn't want to lose his life. These things profoundly change me when I see them. One of the reasons why is because I ultimately believe that in order for us to be able to have our relationship with God, that Adam and Eve sinned. And I believe that even though we had the choice, and it started out with a choice, and our lives all depend on these choices, I believe that this whole process was known and was meant to happen. And ultimately, that is how we prove our loyalty, which I've done shows on this as well. That's how we prove that we can be trained, trusted, and we won't quit. And unfortunately, along with this sin that we have and this world that was created basically for us to go through this training process, these animals are ferocious, and death occurs in them as well. And when I see these things, it doesn't. It affects me profoundly because I know that the brutality of life is a result of us, and life is brutal. Make no mistake about it. But the reality is, like when I went through SEAL training, it was brutal, and most people don't make it through. But it ultimately exists, and the brutality exists so that the right people make it through. And so we have to subscribe to that understanding, and despite the brutality of it, understand that it is for a purpose. And in the case of the SEAL teams, it's so that the guy to your left and to your right will not kill you when you go into a door or when you're shooting live fire next to each other. And also when the nation needs people to do dirty jobs and dangerous jobs that nobody else will do, they can call the teams and they'll answer the call and do it better than anybody else. It's the same thing with life. This brutality that exists in this life exists because that's what it takes in order to train a human being to be a servant of God after this life. That's what I believe. If you want to go back and listen to episode, I believe it was 142. It was the Christmas episode about the meaning of life. Go listen to that when I explain that a lot more detail. But where am I going with all this stuff? Well, ultimately, I think that the people who end up being patriots and why they feel like they're called to this, and why people are going to Washington, D.C., and why some people are going to their state capitals. Why people, when we discuss these things, like when I met this incredible man down in Florida at the pilot station, or my neighbor, when we used to sit and have these conversations, Kirby Scott, another guy that is a beloved friend of mine and mentor, I hate saying that Kirby's black because Kirby's not black. Kirby has, from a physical standpoint, he has black skin. But Kirby Scott is Kirby Scott. He's not a black man, just like I'm not a white man. That's the color of our skin, but we are individual patriots who understand life and God and the death of Jesus Christ, and that we are in this life for a reason. And Kirby Scott's one of the greatest human beings I've ever met. And so when I look at all these things, and I look at all these people, and I look at all these experiences, and I understand who we are as patriots and why we're called to this, I wish I could have a stage for 5 minutes with all the people that are going to Washington, D.C., and I could sit with them for 5 minutes and just help them realize that rallying without unification, that showing up to support without strength, and strength in numbers is not strength. I mean, strength in numbers without unification is not strength. You can be decimated by that. You go look at the way, for instance, dolphins, right? The way dolphins, if you ever see the videos of them, the way that they will hunt together. Sometimes they hunt much larger or much bigger groups, because they will circle and play these games, and they will tire the other animals out, and then they'll go in for the kill. And you can show up 1 million strong in Washington, D.C., but if you're not unified, you're not going to learn the reality, or you're not going to understand the reality of what needs to be done from January 6th on. It's not the president that's going to save this country. It's you. It's us. It's the patriots. Just like it's not Joe Biden that's going to destroy this country. It's really the left. They're much more uniform. They have much greater focus. And they're robots by and large, so it's much easier. They believe what they're told. They do what they're told. So they may have a leader, but ultimately they have ranks. We may have, this hero, President Trump, but the reality is the patriots in this nation are not unified. You can't tell them anything. Well, he tells them to show up and rally, but there's no guidance. People should not have been told to show up to Washington, D.C. without a reason and without guidance. Simply telling everybody to show up and then getting on a stage and then getting off of a stage is not quality leadership from a quality leader. And I'm telling you, it's, if I had 5 minutes with all the people there and help them realize before they left, you cannot leave this location without understanding that you may be called to be in the fight. And you're already being called to be in the fight, but you may actually physically be called to be in a fight. That you may actually physically have to stop these. There is a bill right now in New York that basically is almost like setting up concentration camps that they're going to vote on. The Patriots could stop that. I hear these Patriot groups in different locations. The infighting is ridiculous. You don't hear about that on the left. I cannot believe how much infighting is going on in these groups when we're at the brink of a civil war, and I don't know why they think we have all this time. I was watching, I've done 3 shows with Drago. Drago is my buddy who started ConnectZing, and it's like Facebook platform. You should go sign up for that, first of all, because we don't know after January 20th if Joe Biden gets in there, if this doesn't work out the way we want it to, and Joe Biden's actually elected president, and heaven forbid we lose tomorrow in the Senate, things may change rapidly. There's not going to be a lot of rules and oversight on censorship by the left. Better go join ConnectZing, ConnectZing.com, and get yourself a profile on there in case those go down. And tell all your friends. That way you have the same friends. Same thing with Parler. So, but Drago, I did actually 3 shows, and I just found one. I got my old hard drive out and was looking at it. And when I was doing the experts show, which was on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube in 2017, I went to Ohio and actually interviewed Drago. I wish I would have replayed that because it sounds much better. But it's amazing what we're talking about in 2017. 2 guys who are realists, who have real training and understanding of the Constitution and the sacrifice that's been made and the importance of being free. And Drago, was held in a communist prison for almost 3 years for having a typewriter in Poland before he came here and became a citizen and a Navy SEAL for 20 years. It's unbelievable. I'm talking about the same thing I'm talking about tonight or today in 2017. And I could see it then. I talked about it on the radio in 2016. The fact that there was no unification. And here we are. This is the crazy part about it. Tomorrow, people are driving to Washington, D.C. We may lose the Senate tomorrow because the Republican establishment has become the party of appeasement. We're in a predicament now in Georgia. And I'm so glad that Tom Cotton from Arkansas, which is my home state, and he's actually from my home district, I'm so glad that he said what he said, because I've never really liked Tom Cotton as a politician. And I think that he's shown through his statements of not backing what's going to be going on the 6th and not supporting this electoral college decision and asking and insisting on more investigations into what's going on. He says he doesn't want to set a precedence. That in of itself sets a precedence, because I guess now you can cheat, and if they don't find enough evidence quick enough, then they can just move on, is what that precedence is. We should never have gotten away from paper ballots and one-day voting, and we should have instituted voter IDs and made it completely transparent, where there's video cameras where anybody can watch, what is going on with the balloting and the ballot counting. And quite frankly, I think it's time for the military to take over and run the polls just the same way that they are, doing, whenever there's what's the word I'm looking for here? A natural disaster, right? And we call it the National Guard. Everybody fully trusts them to take care of what's happening in the city that's where this natural disaster is happening. They should be trusted the same way to overwatch these elections. I don't know. It's just opinion on this. So law enforcement's the same way. It should just be paper ballots, voter ID, one-day voting only. And look, I drove to Arkansas this year, as I always do, and I voted. And I voted a week or two early. But even that, listen, it was a benefit for me because I got to vote and got to go there. But I don't think it should be done early. I really think it should be that day. This was the first year I've ever voted early. And there's no real need to do it in Arkansas, because you pretty much in most places you just walk right up there and vote. Anyway, I don't want to go down this road too much, because the reality is, right, there are people that are still thinking that the president's going to pull it off, that the president's going to do it, that this nation is going to be just fine because of the president. Look, supporting this president is amazing. It's awesome. We should be doing it. But it is not a pie in the sky. You cannot think that the president is going to solve it all, because he's not, and he didn't. He didn't solve it all over the past 4 years. No man can. You, the citizenry, you can. The patriots, the conservatives, the constitutionalists, you're going to be the ones that save or lose this nation. And that's the reality. There's nothing else there. That's the way it was meant to be in this nation. Participation, showing up to participate, and taking it seriously. So seriously that you be willing to go to war with any group that is trying to subvert this nation. But you can't do that if you're not united. You can't do that if you have infighting and gossiping and not showing up. It can't be done. And quite frankly, I'll say it just like this. I don't curse that much, okay? I really don't. But because I don't feel it's really important. But I don't give a damn about personal feelings when it comes to this. My body, I wake up every day with a new ache. A lot of the times when I get up, my neck, or if I sit somewhere, this is even the worst. I sit somewhere for dinner, out or something. My neck is so jacked up because I fell out of a helicopter off the coast of Panama when we were doing exercises. We did a takedown of a ship, and a storm came up, and the Night Stalkers came. They dropped us. We fast roped in. They come in to get us. There's one helicopter that flies Overwatch while the other one hovers above the ship and throws a rope ladder down. And quite often that rope ladder is 10 to 20 feet, right? Doesn't sound like much. If the helicopter pilot's really good and confident, they can get down to 10, 20 feet. And I wasn't even in the platoon. I was actually a junior officer sent down to Panama to help close down Panama, and then they threw me in the platoon to help out and do things. And so because I was a new guy down there, they made me sit on the rope ladder so the rope ladder would be stiff, and the other guys could climb up the rope ladder much easier. And listen, there is a gigantic helicopter flying over my head about 20 feet up. The ship is being tossed all over the place because it was a frigate, I believe. It was small. And I've got guys climbing up this rope ladder while I'm being swept all over the deck like a mop. And they're all putting their radios in my backpack as they climb up. So now I've got my backpack's 50 pounds heavier because I got all these radios in it. And my arms are smoked at this point. So I get up. It's my turn to climb up the rope ladder. I'm the last guy. There's nobody holding the rope ladder. So if you've ever tried to climb up a rope ladder, it's hard enough, but underneath the helicopter in heavy winds, it was tremendously hard. And so as I get to the top of the rope ladder to pull myself in, the helicopter hits a pocket of air and flings me about 20, 25 feet because it kind of rose up a little bit. And I landed on my back with a full backpack and wrenched my neck and bulged a disc. I guess I really don't know the everything that happened because I only went to rarely in the teams when you get injured do you go to the doctor. That's the problem. That's one of the biggest problems we have in the military. You get injured and you just keep it quiet because you want to keep operating. So my neck was jacked up. My whole back was jacked up. I injured my lower back and my neck, and then years later, surviving with this neck injury all this time, not having any surgery, just pushing through it. And I'm in the FBI Academy, and I got this big giant Mormon that I'm boxing, and he goes to throw a punch. I duck it, and he lands on my neck, and literally I just collapsed. Then again, I shut my mouth because I didn't want to be kicked out of the FBI Academy. And so all this time for years after that, doing surveillance and sitting in a vehicle with my arm up on the steering wheel, the neck injury is getting worse and worse to a point where the disc ruptured and I had to have neck surgery. And so here I am through all this service with a jacked up neck. I get up every morning in pain with my knees. My knees are in pain. I tore a tendon, my quad tendon off my knee as a civilian. But when they went in there, they were like, man, you have bone spurs all over your knee or your kneecap and in there. And they said, that's probably what severed the tendon. That's from jumping out of an airplane, from falling down, doing all these different things. I get up every morning. When I sit, I'm in pain. But you know what? So what? I've never really talked about that on this show before. The point I'm trying to make is I suffered for freedom. I mean, my gosh, there's freaking guys I know that just in training that died for freedom. I know a ton of guys who died in combat, but I know a lot of people who died in training. One guy died in Buds. He took freedom so seriously, he died in training. And yet there's people that insist on gossiping because they don't like each other, going out there and grifting off of this patriotic movement, constantly having these bus tours and these different things that are going on in Washington, D.C., getting their butts up on stage and sucking the life and the opportunity out of everybody. They don't know what they're doing. There's no way that they would ever know how to unify the nation. They don't call people up on there to unify the nation. They just want to make the money and have the fame. They're fame whores. And quite frankly, I'm sick of it, and that's one of the reasons why we're in the predicament we're in. Because individuals want to make it about themselves, because these grifters they don't want to give the stage to people who can actually come up there and give guidance. And we have leaders, including this president, who have failed to unify the patriots in this nation. The patriots don't unify themselves. The grifters get in the way, and the leaders don't unify the people. And listen, I'm not just talking about getting people to, we show up to a rally. We're driving to Washington, D.C. Okay, there's no guidance. There's no understanding of who the people are. There's no understanding that ultimately you're the strength. It's not been given to you. You haven't taken it upon yourself to understand, and we're in this position. And that is the reality. You're called to be a patriot for the right reasons. We're failing at it because we choose not to stand together. Now, many of you are driving to Washington, D.C. for the 6th right now, or maybe you're getting ready to go to your state capitals on the 6th, or maybe you're not going to do anything, and that's okay. Because regardless of where you go, you need to realize that you were called to be a patriot. You've made that decision multiple times, but you have a foundation of U.S. history, of the knowledge of why this country is the way it is, and understanding, and you've experienced freedom. But what's happening now is that the patriots don't have guidance, they don't have tasking, and they're not unified. We have to get unified now. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and I'm out of here.